So thank you very much Thank you very much. So I am going to talk to you today about what every woman and man, we've only got one man in the room. Don't let him out, please. Don't let him out.
It's all the man in it.
What you should know about women's health and the reproductive years. So I'm actually going to go from the menstrual cycle to the menopause. So I'm going to talk for about 40 minutes or so. And then, I don't know how many of you have used a Kahoot before. Have some of you done a Kahoot? Those with kids, your kids would have done a Kahoot. It's an interactive survey with just 8 questions that I'm going to do at the end so that I can hear from you and some of your thoughts. So, were you taught at school much about the menstrual cycle, fertility, or the menopause? Anyone taught all 3? No. No. So this is where we are today. So just a disclosure, I run a company where we train scientists to work in fertility called the Embryology and PGD Academy. A few years ago I set up a web-based forum, Global Women Connected, to talk about some of the issues I'm going to talk to you about today. And also, more recently, I've been working on Femtech. Anyone heard of Femtech? No, Femtech is using digital technology to learn about your health. So I'll talk to you a little bit more about that during the talk. And I work with a couple of companies on Femtech. So, what I'm going to talk to you about is fertility, the major gender inequality. And then I'm going to talk to you about female fertility decline, natural and IVF pregnancy rates, the menstrual cycle, when is our fertile window, and why women are delaying having children, the need to improve fertility education, and then the menopause. And these are all things I'm really passionate about making sure that women and men understand. And men need to understand it because they will have women in their life. They have a mother, they might have sisters, they might have a wife, a partner, or they might have daughters. And they need to understand what women go through and think about their well-being at different stages in their lives. So, the major gender inequality. Women will only ovulate, at the most, normally-ish, 1 egg per month from puberty till the menopause. And if you do the maths, it's about 400 to 500 eggs that she will ovulate in her whole life. Okay, guys, I have done a soapbox science where I'm still on the South Bank asking guys how many sperm in their ejaculate, and I can tell you none of them got it right. So, there are about 100 million sperm in every single ejaculate. So, guys can ejaculate from puberty till the day they die, if they've got the energy, every single time, producing even in a year, billions and billions of sperm. So the egg contains half of the chromosomes from the mother that's going to make the future child, and the sperm does exactly the same. It's got half the chromosomes that the man has produced to make his future child. Why we have this gender inequality, we just don't know, but it is a very, very flawed system. So, I'm going to tantalise you a bit here, looking at gender inequality. Famous older dads. So a little bit of fun for you later, because these are just a few. Go on Google tonight with your friends and Google celebrity older dads, and you will get a very, very long list. So in their 50s, Simon Cowell, George Clooney. 60s, Jeff Goldblum, Steve Martin, and this was his first child, never had children before. Mick Jagger, 73, Rupert Murdoch, 72. Wow. Okay, one thing they all have in common, they have a much, much younger partner, obviously. So, let's look at this the other way around, famous older mums. Now, we are starting a decade earlier, and this is much, much harder to find. So we've got Rachel Weisz, we've got Laura Linney in their 40s, Janet Jackson, Bridget Nielsen caused a lot of press last year, giving birth at 54. And there are some not so famous people in between who have had children in their 50s and 60s. but one of the most famous people who became a celebrity after she gave birth was a lady in India who had twins. We're not quite sure how old she was, but they think she's around 72. So, one thing they all have in common is the use of expensive fertility treatment. Because getting pregnant in your 40s, late 40s, is technically possible, naturally, but highly, highly unlikely. You may know someone, we have been the odd famous person in their late 40s, but it's really, really unusual. So, we have a problem. The quantity and quality of eggs declines daily in a woman. Let's start when she's a fetus. When a woman is a fetus in her mother, she has the most eggs she's ever going to have at that time. She has about 7 million when she's a 20-week-old fetus. And unfortunately, things go downhill from there. So, by birth, most of those have died. So by birth, we've got about 1 to 2 million. From birth to puberty, they're still dying. So we've got about 300 to 500,000 at puberty. And for puberty to the menopause, as I said, one ovulates each month, but about 1,000 die each month. So women, if they have a lot of pregnancies, or if they're on the contraceptive pill and they're not ovulating, they think, I'm fine, I've saved those eggs for another time. I'm going to delay the onset of the menopause. That's absolutely not true. These eggs die every month, whether you ovulate or not. So by age 37, about 90% have gone. And by the menopause, there's no viable eggs left. There are a few eggs left around on the ovaries, but they're not viable. So, as I said, over a woman's life, only about 500 eggs will ovulate. So the quality of those eggs is also a problem. It's a little bit to do with the chromosomes. There are some other factors in the egg that make the quality of the egg less. But let's just talk about the chromosomes, because these are the most important. And chromosomes, when they form into an egg or a sperm, the chromosomes in these cells have to undergo this special process called meiosis, which I won't go into at all. Just to say that this is the process that halves the number of chromosomes in the egg and the sperm, so that when they come together, they make a normal person. Because every one of us in this room has 23 pairs of chromosomes, so one set from mum, one set from dad. That's exactly what's happening with the eggs and the sperm. But this process also starts when we're a fetus. So when we're born, the eggs are in a very fragile state. These chromosomes are being held together in a very fragile position. So between birth and when they actually ovulated, the sooner that is, the more chance they're going to be okay. And the longer it is, so when we hit our 30s and 40s, the chance that these chromosomes are really confused really increases. So as a woman ages, she's got more chance that there will be a decrease in implantation, because a lot of these chromosome imbalances are incompatible with life. The embryo will not even implant. She's got an increased risk of miscarriage. I'm sure most of you know that as a woman ages, she's more likely to have a miscarriage because the chromosomes are muddled. And she's got an increased risk of having a chromosomally abnormal child, such as a child with Down syndrome. So in reproductive science, this is the graph that we always refer to. This is showing that fertility goes down with age, so this is the ages up to 45, and this is because of the quantity and the quality, and the risk of spontaneous abortions because of the quality, because of those chromosomes, this will go up. And the age when things really become significant is age 35. That's when these two graphs are really having a profound effect on a woman's fertility. How do we know this? Where did we get this information from? Well, there have been, originally in the 50s, 60s and 70s, there were a lot of historical studies. So these are all different historical studies that have been reported, and they're summarised in this document here from the American Society of Reproductive Medicine. It's all freely downloadable from their website. And these historic studies all show female fertility decline. One of the most prolific studies was on a group of Protestants that were in a sect in North America and Canada called the Hutterites. And there's been a lot of studies on those. And what all these studies have in common is that there was no contraception used, and these populations did not have a limit on family size. They were encouraging people to continue to have pregnancies throughout their life. But they still showed that female fertility declined with age. But what about modern studies? Because these have been criticised, and they've said, well, some of these were before there was even a light bulb. So how can we relate this to modern society? Well, there have been many, many studies. I'm just showing you just a few of the key studies. These have looked at modern populations, and some of them are really big. This How is a big Oxford study, huge numbers of women where they followed fertility at different ages and showed exactly the same. Female fertility decline. All of these studies felt that the fertility decline started in the early 30s, became significant around 35 to 37. Now, one thing with these studies is that they are influenced by the amount of sex people have and also male infertility. And modern studies do show that people, as they get older, apparently have less sex. I saw a study the other day that said couples in their 70s are having lots of sex. So there's hope for us yet. But anyway, a lot of studies can be critical that maybe the older couples are having less sex, so that's why they're less fertile. So these really excellent studies were done. These have used donor sperm. These were two of the groundbreaking big studies that looked at couples where the males had no sperm. These were done in the 70s and 80s. The male had no sperm, and so what they did is they looked at women that were coming through fertility clinics to have donor insemination. So this eliminated any male factor infertility and eliminated the frequency of sex, because the woman was having fertility treatment with donor sperm. And these two studies absolutely clearly show exactly the same. Fertility declines after the age of 30, significantly so at 35. What about fertility treatments? Is this the miracle cure? Well, in vitro fertilization was first successful back in 1978. This is Louise Brown, who was the first ever world's IVF baby. She had a very busy year last year. It was her 40th birthday. She was everywhere. And that's me and her at the Royal College of Obs and Gynae. It cannot work miracles. It does push the age effect slightly a few years up, as I will show you, but it cannot override our biological clock. So this is the USA IVF data. Now, most countries that look at data, they put all the data under 35 together, because in IVF we have found that under 35 the fertility rate it's not significantly different from around 33 to around 27. That's not quite the same with natural fertility. That does start having an effect around the age of 30, but for IVF we sort of push that age up a little bit. So all the data under 35 is grouped together, and then they've grouped it in a 2 to 3 year age groups. In the American data, they don't show any data above age 40. So as you can see, there's a decrease. The UK data, sorry this next graph's a bit complicated, but this is the data from the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. Again, they group under 35s together, and it's all these different things that some are frozen, some are fresh, and they're different ways of expressing the same data. But you can see no matter what bar you look at, everything decreases, and the most important bar is this one here. This yellow is fresh transfers, and you can see that really drastically goes down after the age of 35. At 44, it's just a few percent. There have been some IVF children born at that age, but there are very, very few patients. And I don't know anyone in IVF who's got anyone pregnant at 45, put it that way. I keep asking, have you got anyone pregnant? No one has. So, it is the eggs, it's not the womb. So these are some infamous women who got pregnant using donor eggs. Unfortunately, both of these women were single, both in their late 60s, both got pregnant using donor eggs. At least one of them died after a couple of years. That was the top one. So this is the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority data for donor eggs. So it's exactly the same. Here's the other graph using their own eggs, and this is using donor eggs. And basically, if you look again at any of the bars, they basically show that using a donor egg, it doesn't matter, even if they're over 44. It's nothing in it really. So the womb's okay, but if you use a young woman's egg and put it back in an older woman, they've still got a really good chance of getting pregnant. Now, obstetrically, this is not a good idea to be pregnant in your late 40s, but it is possible. But the obstetrician will tell you about that. So just to show you, that's that graph again. So you compare the two, really drastic difference. The womb is okay. So this study was published a couple of years ago. This group here have done a lot of the groundbreaking studies looking at time to pregnancy and fertility rates for decades. This team have been working on this. And they did this study looking at when do you need to start trying for your family. If you tried naturally or with IVF and you want a 90% chance of achieving your family size. So as I said, naturally it's a little bit below IVF, but if you want 3 children, they've said 23 years. If you use IVF, it's a little bit higher, so it's late 20s and early 30s. I find that really depressing data to tell any group of women, because that's not what they want to hear. So, we have another problem. The age that women are having children is increasing, and this data here is the average age women give birth. So the white triangles are the data from 1995, and the bars are data from 2015. This is age 30 that I keep talking about. This is age, well, 35 is just up here. So you can see from 1995, every single country, the average age women have children has increased. And in the UK, I wasn't going to mention the EU, but the EU's here. And the UK, I always lose it, somewhere around here, is a little bit higher. But these countries here, really interesting, quite varied group of countries. It's over 30, the average age that women are having children. So this is a really big problem. And what we see, if we look at the ages that women are having children, teenage pregnancies has decreased. There's been a big move in the UK to decrease teenage pregnancies. But the older mothers has increased. So this is 40 and over, and the black one's 35 to 39. And these are the teenage years. So we need to think about this really seriously. Why are women delaying having children? Well, why not? People now, men and women, have much better life choices now than we did 20, 30 years ago. We may not have found the right partner. And this I have put at the top. I used to have this lower down. I put it at the top now. I'm finding that this is one of the biggest issues with women in their early 30s. Finding the right partner or the partner who will commit. Because men and women both have all these choices. They have better chances at education. The jobs we do now are much more exciting. I don't know if anyone saw the Remembrance Day video of interviews with soldiers that were going to war 100 years ago. And they thought war was fun because they were doing really mundane jobs that were not exciting. And now people are doing amazing jobs. They want to do other things, travel the world, party, etc. And I put financial at the bottom. I think financial is always an issue, but that's not changed over the years. So it happened to me. I found myself in a relationship at 30 when I wanted to have kids. He wasn't ready. We split when I was 32. Went out with someone who wasn't the right person either. And at 35, knowing I knew all of this then, I was like, oh my goodness, what? I've got to really make a move on this. And the person I met at 35, I told him on the first date, if you don't want kids, I don't want to see you tomorrow. literally it was that. But I had problems, and this is why I'm so passionate about this. This is my eldest son. He was born just before my 40th birthday after 4 years of fertility treatment. And I do not want anyone to go through what I went through. I was convinced for 5 years that I was not going to have a child, that I was going to, I hate to use this word, but barren was the word that came, you know, into it all the time. I can't do what my body should be doing as a woman, and I do want to have kids. I absolutely respect people that don't want to have kids. It's a choice, but if you do want kids, and then you realise you can't do this. And I had the kids made at work through the clinics that I'd been working with. So I didn't pay. And I've really been trying to help people that are campaigning to get at least 2 or 3 fertility treatments allowed on the NHS. Because if I had to pay on my academic wage, I would not have my amazing miracle children. So, you know, I don't want people to be at risk of what happened to me. Now, why am I so passionate about this at this moment in time? Is because there is some really bad advice to the 30-year-old woman, mainly given by this woman here. I'm really looking forward to the time when I meet her. She's a professor of psychology in the States. This is Jean Twenge, and she, at 35, found herself in a new relationship, and she had 3 children naturally after the age of 35. Well done, I'm really, really pleased. But she's on a crusade to tell women that this female fertility decline over a woman's 30s has been oversold. She feels that how she's interpreted all of the studies, some of which I've shown you, is totally different to how everyone in reproductive science over the whole world that have been working on this for decades have interpreted the data. She obviously knows something that I don't. So there are a number of articles. Baby panic. Why are the risks not being told as they are? This article saying we're wrong. All of these articles quote her, I must say, and that apparently all of the work that we've been doing in this field is bad science. It's really not bad science. I am an absolute fanatic about evidence-based medicine. What's being done is not bad science. So there's a video of her online. This is a screenshot. She says, the difference in fertility between a woman in her late 20s and her late 30s is a few percentage points. Why is she telling women this? I absolutely strongly believe some women that read this are going to be more in denial than they were already, and they're going to say, right, I don't need to try to have kids now, I'll wait till I'm 38. And then there's going to be a really large percentage who will have missed the boat. And I don't want that to happen. So, good advice, my good advice, to the 30-year-old woman. Decide whether or not you want children. And that's absolutely a really valid decision now. And we have the choice, we have contraception, we are under no pressure now to have children. I know a growing number of people who actively decide they do not want children. But if you do want children, there are only 3 options. You start trying now, either with a partner or solo motherhood with donor sperm. I see a lot more of this now. You wait until you are ready. Most people will never feel they're ready. Or you freeze your eggs. I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. Now, I've done a lot of discussions with women around about 30, professional women. This is one that we did a few weeks ago in Madrid. And you say to these groups of women, do you want children? And they almost all say yes. What age are you going to start trying? And they all say, not yet. And they're all, some of them were 30, one of them was 33 in that group. Some of them had partners, some of them were married, and they all said, not yet. So women in 2019 are absolutely in denial about their fertility. So I've been working with the media as much as I can to try and get this message out there. This is an article in Women's Health magazine. In your 30s, this is what you need to know about your fertility. And I spent the last 3-4 years writing a book about women's health that I had originally started, honestly, in 1987, but I never finished it. Anyway, I finished it last year, but then the agents Curtis Brown came to see me, and they've been very aware of the Twenge articles, and they said, can I write an evidence-based book about fertility and fertility awareness? So I'm editing my book at the moment, so it's not quite finished. It was finished when that's been re-edited. But I think the message is much more powerful, because I think there's so many women in denial and they need to know the facts about this. And they are given lots of very mixed messages. So can we test for our fertility? So if you're 30, can you go and have a test that will say, yep, you're fine, no you're not, start trying now? Well, unfortunately not. Sometimes it's called the fertility MOT, and lots of clinics try to sell you this. Some of them charge about £500. If the result is good, the advice is still to try sooner rather than later. If the result's bad, the advice is exactly the same. And if the result's bad, that doesn't mean you're not going to get pregnant naturally. There's so many stories about women that immediately got pregnant, but no scientific data to show how that really stands. So I'm a little bit of a lone voice saying that I don't think this test is a good idea. There are some parts of it that may be useful for a few women if they identify something that's wrong. But for the majority of women, this is really not going to be of help to them. So, how do we optimise our fertility? This is for men and women. We need to look at the 4 pillars of our well-being, which are nutrition, exercise, sleep, and stress. So, all of us need to be sorting this out, whether we want children or not. For our well-being, we need to dedicate time to this. But even more so if we are having a child, if we're going to start to try to get pregnant and have a child. Some of these things do affect fertility. There's a little bit of contradiction around some of them, for sure. But what they absolutely affect is the health of our future child. So Judith Stevenson in our department with some colleagues from Southampton and from UCL last year published 3 excellent papers in the Lancet, which all look about our health before we actually even conceive a child. And they have very clearly shown that if you have health issues and you're not sorting out your pillars of well-being before you have your child, this could affect the health of the child long term. So for example, obesity in the mother is not good. The father's not good. If they're both obese, it's really not good. So I know that's obvious, but there's lots of other things, smoking, alcohol, etc., etc. So once that's all fabulous, which I appreciate, it's hard, and a lot of people say, I don't have time to go to the gym. I did a run this morning, so I can say I did a run. I went for a little run. But it's really important. It's so important for our well-being. So, now to try and get pregnant. Now, our menstrual cycle, as I asked you at the beginning, very few of you have been really properly taught about this in school. The majority of menstrual cycles are about 25 to 30 days, but they do range. So the normal range is actually 21 to 35 days. So that's quite a big range. Under that or over that is considered not normal. So we bleed on day 1, and then we have a phase called the follicular phase. This is the phase here where the egg in the follicle is starting to prepare, but there's some that are going to die, as I said, but the one that's going to ovulate is growing and growing and maturing. And the textbook day is that we ovulate that egg around about day 14. And then after that, the womb is getting ready for the potential implanting of the embryo, and that's called the luteal phase, and that's from day 14 till the next period. This 14 plus 14, as we call it, is a really textbook event, and we have been doing some research on a very large number of cycles, and we have found that this is not the situation. It does happen that ovulation happens on day 14, but most women are not textbook BMI, textbook age, textbook 28-day cycles ovulate on day 14. There's a lot of women that do not fall into that bracket. So I can't say more about the study, we've just submitted it for publication, but watch this space. We will, once it's out, we will let people know. The important thing is that a woman needs to find her own fertile window, not the textbook one, what her fertile window is. So there are a number of methods to do this, and I think this can get really confusing. So, looking at the calendar is the basic one, but as I said, if you've got a 28-day cycle, even then you may not, for you, be ovulating on day 14. So I think that's really not that useful at all. You can measure your temperature. The day you ovulate, your temperature slightly goes up. That is possible, but I think for a woman that can get quite complicated. Something a little bit more complicated, you can measure your cervical mucus. It should become blobby and stretchy and all the change characteristics. But even more complicated, I got a recent book called Fertility, and they say, yes, you should measure all of these, and you should measure all of them together. Okay, talk about taking the romance out of making a baby. Wow, that's okay. We've got thermometers, we've got mucus, we've got calendars, all of these graphs, and the poor woman's trying to interpret these, and then the poor guy, right, come on, we're at it now, you know, oh, let's go, I'm ovulating. I think that's really confusing. Me personally, if I've ever had anyone who's wanted some advice about trying to get pregnant, I've said use an ovulation stick. You apparently can buy large quantities from Amazon, quite cheaply, I don't know. They used to be quite expensive, but you just wee on these sticks around the time of ovulation, and they measure a hormone that increases about 25 to 40 hours before you ovulate. So that's great because it's in advance, you know it's going to happen, and then you can have intercourse at the right time for you, for sure. But our Femtech, I mentioned at the beginning, there is an app for everything. And there are about 100 fertility apps. We're doing a number of studies on these fertility apps at the moment. I gave a talk to my students last year, and they said, oh, our menstrual cycle app tells us when we're ovulating. And when I asked them about it, it was just a calendar menstrual cycle app. So there are apps that help women know, just put in the app, yeah, I have my period today. It will let them know when their next period is roughly due. It's got an algorithm, it learns a little bit about their cycles. There's many hundreds of menstrual cycle apps. But if it's just using the date, it cannot tell you when you are ovulating. It can tell you when the textbook tells you you're ovulating, but not when if it's only measuring the dates. So these other fertility apps, they can measure all of these sorts of things, but it all goes in an algorithm, and you don't have to think about this. It just tells you, ovulating, not ovulating. So I think that's the future, but as I said, we're studying them at the moment. And now let's move on to freezing eggs. So this is a really hot topic. The methods have only just started working. That egg, if you remember that picture I showed at the beginning, the egg's in a really big cell with these fragile chromosomes. And it's big because when it fertilizes, it's got to provide all the nutrients that it's going to, the early embryo is going to need until it sets up a blood connection with the mother and sets up the early placenta. So for the first few weeks, that egg has got to provide all the nutrients that the embryo is going to need to develop. So freezing that egg has been a really tricky thing to do, but it's about 12, 13 years now that we have been able to freeze this egg, and it's the procedure that we use is called vitrification. It's a really quite high-tech way of freezing cells. And a lot of studies came out when this was first started, and by 2010 the American Society said this was no longer an experimental procedure. So, we've written a few papers on egg freezing, but is this really the answer? So are we saying that the woman who wants to delay her fertility should freeze her eggs? We're totally medicalising her reproduction. She may then not reproduce naturally, she may, but she may not, depending how old she is when she decides she wants to use them. And great for the IVF units, loads more people going through IVF, but personally, I've been through this, I would have much preferred to have got pregnant naturally. So our graduation presents to our daughters, or our granddaughters, or our sister, is this a trip to the IVF clinic to have your eggs frozen? I feel uncomfortable about this situation if we we'll end up with a really diverse population where we've got the career women who have the money to do this, go off and freeze their eggs, and the more working class woman who doesn't have the money to not. I think we'll have a batch in the middle who will also miss the boat. So we've been doing a few studies on this. This is some data from the HFEA. This shows you the age of the women who have frozen their eggs in the UK. So what do you think would be the optimum age?
30.
Yeah.
As soon as you're born.
Okay. maybe. So unfortunately, this is age 30 here. So you can see almost everyone in the UK who's freezing their eggs is over, actually 35 is here. So all of this group here are over 35. That is not where we want to be. And part of that reason in the UK is that someone, somewhere in their wisdom, has decided that if you freeze your eggs in the UK, you can only store them for 10 years. There is absolutely no logic in that at all. If you freeze sperm because you're having a vasectomy, you can freeze your sperm for 55 years. If you freeze your eggs, because most people that freeze their sperm, they've already had several kids, that's why they're having the vasectomy. They don't want kids. These are women that want children. Oh, you can only freeze them for 10 years and then you've got to throw them away. So I've been doing a lot of work around getting this out there, and we've tried a number of things. It got discussed in the House of Lords and we thought we were almost there, and then some guy turned around and said, no, computer says no. Really? Why? What's the logic in this? I think they're worried about, remember that slide of the older dads? They're worried that we push that forward, so there's famous women in their 60s and 70s having children with their eggs. They can do that anyway with a donor egg. So some of these women are going to throw their frozen embryos in the bin and then have a donor egg. That's illogical, totally illogical. And with Kylie Baldwin and Dan Reisel, we've been doing some survey of women freezing their eggs. You probably can't read this, but this says no partner. And this says no suitable partner. So the majority of women are doing this not for selfish reasons. They can't find someone to have kids with. And this is a really ongoing problem. So we've done a few other studies. This was one of my students, Ilham, did a study looking at Muslim views to social egg freezing, and most women, single and married, thought this was a good idea, about 80%. And Allegra has been doing a PhD on religious views to fertility treatment, and she's interviewed some scholars who were mostly unsure whether frozen eggs should be done. Most women thought it would be, but there were a few that were not decided. We've also done a study looking at companies. You may have heard that some companies have said they'll pay as a bonus for their female employees to have their eggs frozen. So this has been in the press quite a lot in the UK, and we interviewed a lot of these companies, and they all said in the UK that they're not offering it in the UK, but I think in the US it is offered. So the data's come from the US, but it's not happening yet in the UK. And with Emily Jackson, who's Professor of Law at the LSE, we're looking at various legal aspects of egg freezing. So let's just go through the advantages and disadvantages. It removes the biological clock, for sure. It gives the woman control over their fertility and their lives. There's no need to put your career on hold, no rush to find a partner. That's really one of the biggest issues, for sure. Oh, I'm shaking. It reduces the need for IVF when older, so full IVF. So for me, if I'd have frozen my eggs when I was 25, I would have got pregnant a lot quicker. I had lots of fertility treatment to get my kids. I would have had less fertility treatment, for sure. And it reduces the risk of chromosome abnormalities. If the eggs are 25 years old compared to 35 or 45, those fragile chromosomes will definitely be less of a risk. But the disadvantages are, it does not guarantee a baby. It's a backup, but it's not a guarantee. There's little data on success. We've got data from young egg donors, but we haven't got a lot of data because a lot of women have not gone back and used the eggs. And in the UK, so many of them are over 35. It's not going to give good data, for sure. So you need to be under 35, but it's very expensive. In other countries, it's a lot less. But IVF in the UK has blown way out of proportion, way. That's another project that I'm working on. There's a group of us working on the commercialisation of IVF. In Spain, egg freezing is half what it is in the UK. Risk to older age mothers. People worry about the obstetrics problems of women carrying a child, as I said, and we've got this 10-year limit. So the advice, I think, from the majority of people that work in our field is the best chance is to have children when you're young, in inverted commas. So in 2016, I set up with Adam Balin the Fertility Education Initiative, and we held a summit in 2016 to find out what people thought about this. And we've worked with a number of key partners about fertility education. The aims of the Fertility Education Initiative are to teach all of these people all of these things. So we thought big. Understand human fertility, understand how different types of families can be made, and understand reproductive technologies. So, what we have done so far, we've got our website, quite flash, but quite low budget, but it's a start. We've published 2 papers, one just sort of really saying what we were doing and why we were doing it, and one where we used art to try and captivate children's enthusiasm about discussing this topic. Because a lot of kids, it's the last thing they're thinking about. They're not thinking about having babies. We wrote into a consultation document by the government about sex education. We wrote about the need for fertility education. And last year, unfortunately in the Daily Mail, we heard that this has now been integrated, that in the new guidance of PSHE in the UK, they have included fertility education. We've started to make tools. This is an animation that our team have made. We've got 2 more animations planned. And as I said, my book is going to be all about educating the 30-year-old woman-ish about these topics. And a great bit of work that we've done, we've been working with these 2 amazing ladies. Gabby and Jessica have both had their own fertility journey. Gabby has IVF twins, and Jessica did 11 rounds of IVF and was not successful. And she's really been doing amazing work campaigning about awareness of fertility. And they're both artistic directors, and they run something called Fertility Fest, which is a gathering of artists, experts, all sorts of people to do various discussions, workshops, performances about fertility. And last year we were at the Shepherd's Bush Theatre, and it was an absolutely amazing weekend. This year the events are at the Barbican, and they're spread out over many weeks, and I'm performing on the 1st of May the big fertility questions. So I think working with the media for me is really important now to try and get this message out there. So as I said, I've been doing a lot more. And last year there was a play in the West End called Genesis Inc. with Harry Enfield as the IVF doctor. And it really showed the commercialisation of this field. And I wrote a piece for the programme about the reality of fertility. So that was very much, the person that wrote the play had her eggs frozen at, I think she was around 40, and she wanted to share some of her experiences that she had seen in the field. But let's now finish with some good news. You think good news, the menopause? How does that work? I am a big advocate for the absolute wonderful event that will happen to all women at some point, the menopause. It really is great news. No more menstrual cycle, no more periods, no more premenstrual tension, syndrome, whatever you want to call it, no more mood swings. I really cannot emphasise enough. Obviously I'm postmenopausal. I feel the best I have ever felt in my entire life. I feel much better than I did at 25, because all of these things really affected me. And you're either at a stage where you're trying not to get pregnant, or you're at a stage where you're trying to get pregnant. That's what happens to women in their reproductive years. Go through the menopause, draw a line, it's done. The decision's made, you don't have to worry about it anymore. So I really, really can't emphasise enough that postmenopausal, trust me, I really think almost everyone will feel absolutely fabulous. But, there is always a but. But there is a little journey on the way, which again is very individual, and some women sail through it, but some don't. Most don't. And as I said at the beginning, I think it's not just what the woman should know, it's what everyone around a family, friends, the workplace, everyone needs to understand. So the other denial that I find women are in is that anything that happens to them in their 40s, I'm too young to the menopause, it's not the menopause. That is absolutely not correct. Menopausal symptoms can start 10 years before the menopause, but the average age that women go through the menopause is 51. So that means a lot of women are going to have a lot of symptoms in their 40s. So this is one of the most important mood changes: anxiety, anger, depression. If you remember what you were like going through puberty, what were you like? All of these. You hated everything. Well, you know, you were depressed, you were angry, no reason. I used to play the piano, but I just but I just why did I just do that? I have no idea. Okay, you are going to see the same. It's the reverse. The menopause is the reverse of puberty. The same hormones involved, but they're going down now before they were going up. So I know so many women in their 40s that say, I'm so depressed. I don't like anything. I don't like my job. I don't like my friends. I don't like my husband. Stop. Really, really stop. And just think, it might not be me, it might be the menopause. And I worry how many people get divorced because of the menopause, when actually if they thought about it and everyone appreciated it, they'd still be together. So we know about hot flushes, changes of periods, all of these other things. But it's these that I really want women to think about and just take stock. It's difficult to check for the menopause. They can measure a couple of the hormones, one in particular, but you know, it varies and you need to have it done over a few different months. If you're in your 40s and you're getting any of these, it's the menopause, probably. Okay, so we just need to deal with it. And I haven't got, if we had another hour, I'll tell you all about the things you could do. But remember those 4 pillars of well-being: nutrition, exercise, sleep, and anxiety. Those are the things that you've got to sort out. Exactly the same here throughout our whole life. Sort out those 4 pillars and you will help your menopause for sure. You can't drink lots of alcohol. You can't drink lots of coffee, I'm afraid. Yeah, those things are not going to help. Exercising, good food will really, really help, and lots of good sleep will really, really help, all of those. So I'm really passionate about this. In other forums, I do a number of talks called Wellbeing Over 40. I've got this one coming up soon in my town. I'm an ambassador for This Girl Can Essex. In the UK, and actually in every country, women exercise less than men, and if we exercise, we will, if we exercise to the right amount, we will really reduce the chance of many, many diseases. Cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancers, many things. So if you haven't yet, my one big message of today is to make half an hour in your life every day or every couple of days to get some exercise in, for sure. There's all these things now. It's not how long you do it. The government have launched this thing, now I can't remember what it's called, Active 10 I think it's called. You need to walk quickly for 10 minutes 3 times a day. Not 10,000 steps. 10,000 steps, if you do it slowly, I don't know if you've got one of these, it doesn't even register. Okay, you've got to increase your heart rate, for sure. So really important. I've written loads about all of this stuff on Global Women. I've made some videos on YouTube about the menopause, and obviously written things on Global Women about the menopause as well. This is really important, this picture here. Throughout our entire lives, especially women, we deal with everyone else. We look after everyone else before we look after ourselves. This is a woman on a plane putting on the oxygen mask. What do they say? They say, put your own mask on first before you put on anyone else's, your children's. Okay, and that's what we need to do in life. We need to start looking after ourselves, then we'll be in a much better place to look after everyone else. So you'll say, I haven't got time for exercise, I haven't got time to do a meditation, whatever, blah, blah. Okay, you will have more time, more quality time if you do these things, for sure. We've just got to think about how we carve up our 168 hours in a week. So, in conclusion, all of this is about education. We have got to educate. We've got to get talking about these things. That's why I've been working with the media. We've got to get talking. We really can enjoy every stage of our life, but we've got to look after, in my view, 3 key times: teenagers, early 30s, and the menopause. I don't want this to happen if you want kids. So we're doing a lot of work with schools. I think Femtech is a really good way of educating women and giving. There's a lot of information that some of these apps have. We can use them to educate, and we need to work with the press, media, TV, etc., to get these messages out there. So just a little bit of a promotion at the Institute for Women's Health. We do quite a lot of events around International Women's Day, which is on Friday. So today onwards there's an exhibition, My Body, My Life. Later tonight there's a video or a screening of a film called Child of Mine. Tomorrow we are having a lunchtime discussion with Zainab Girton, Paul Hardiman and Emily Jackson on the future of female fertility. I'm not going to talk tomorrow, I'm chairing it, who, what and why. And then a lunch hour lecture by Eric, I think Eric Shano's giving that, Eric Shano's giving that lecture on caesarean section. So they're all at UCL and they're all free. And that's acknowledgements, that's my lovely team, Siobhan's here. This is Emily Jackson, who we've been working with, and Kylie, and I do lots of work with Alpesh Doshi. So now, that's my social media. I'm a social media flirt, whatever. So I've only just started doing it, but it's such a good way to communicate with people, it really is. Especially, I do most things on Twitter, but just search Prof Joyce Harper under any of them. And I'm on Curtis Brown's website, so you can find out more about the book.